All right, welcome to the SpartanMag.com VCast. Jim Comparoni. Paul Konyndyk is going to be joining us in a moment to talk about Michigan State's big victory over Wisconsin. Michigan State inching closer to another Big Ten title. But first, I want to talk about a couple of sponsors. Very happy to have these sponsors. We talked about Roback last time when we did the VCast in Ann Arbor. Roback coming in strong with SpartanMag.com and on 3. We're glad to have them as a promotional partner. There's only one way to describe Roback: best fit, best feel. For those who aren't familiar with Roback, they are completely changing the game with their incredibly comfortable activewear, and it is comfortable. Roback has released a lot of new items within their new licensed game day collection, and they're pretty good, really good. They have a great polo design, great polo designs, and a clean hoodie look. You can go to their website, check those out, and quarter zip designs from some of your favorite teams. It's definitely worth checking out. Nobody else on the market is pairing these level of custom designs with this quality of activewear. And Michigan State, the Michigan State line, a new one, is supposed to be going online today, March 3rd. But I went looking for it. I don't know if it's up yet, but March 3rd, it's dropping today, if not tomorrow sometime this week. Keep an eye out for that at roback.com. That's spelled Rhoback, Roback. Also check out Roback's everyday shorts. They're called everyday shorts, and their Delta Performance pants. They're both super comfortable, have an elastic waistband and great fabric that is made to have the appearance of a nice short look, but comfortable for a day on the move. Roback has signed partnerships with multiple college football players, past and present, and Roback is becoming the go-to brand for college athletes across the country. Use the code word Spartan, all caps, Spartan, Spartan, at roback.com for a generous 20% off for all new customers. Spartan, all caps. That's roback.com, spelled Rhoback. And as you know, Michigan's recycling rate has fallen from 90% to 73% in recent years, and Michiganders are squandering $105 million per year by not taking back their bottles and cans. You guys know that. We've been talking about it, and I've heard a lot of people on board with this. Keep going with it. That's good, because when you're not taking the bottles back here in the state of Michigan, it's hurting our environment. So help the environment, help yourself, help your beaches. They're your lakes and roads and beaches. Take them back. A message from Shupan, a great Michigan company dedicated to recycling and to the Michigan State Spartans. All right, let's go out to our good friend Paul Konyndyk. Konyndyk was at Breslin Center Sunday for Michigan State's victory over Wisconsin. I was not able to make it there. We've talked about that on the message board earlier today. Had an automobile situation. The fleet of cars are getting old, Paul, and the old minivan might be being retired real soon. It was at a wedding in the Detroit area on Saturday night, and on the way back straight to Breslin. Didn't leave a lot of time for something like that to happen. Then you tow it, then you're at a garage, then you Uber, then you try to rent a car, and couldn't make it to the game. Paul Konyndyk was there. Because I was not there, we were not able to do a VCast right after the game like we normally do, but we're getting into it now because it is that big of a deal. Michigan State with a big win over Wisconsin and edging closer toward a Big Ten championship. Paul, what is Michigan State now? 23-5, 25-5? I'm losing count. You got that at the top of your what are they?
Yeah, it's 24-5, number 8 in the AP poll. And I missed you yesterday, Jim, but it was nice to have a little bit more elbow room and be able to spread my stuff out because I know you take up a lot of space.
I do. I got to have the laptop here, and I got some other junk here, and I've got my pad of paper here, and I get a little bit. I'm a little bit high maintenance with those things. So I know no one missed me there along that part of press row. Michigan State 71-62, finishing strong again. The strength in numbers thing, not just a mantra, not just a slogan. It's really having an impact late in games. Defense, execution late, loose balls, rebounds. We're seeing it over and over and over. Michigan State dominated the late going against a really good Wisconsin team. And Jaden Akins, 19 points, 6 out of 18 from the field. Not a great percentage, but 4 out of 9 from three-point range. You get 4 out of 9 from three-point range or anything above 40% from Jaden Akins from beyond the arc, and this team is different. We've not seen it a lot this year. They've been winning a lot without that component. But Akins, especially in the first half during the comeback, huge in this victory for Michigan State. Paul, your thoughts about Akins? You had a story about him at SpartanMag.com. Go check it out at SpartanMag.com. You spoke with him in the locker room afterwards. Your thoughts about the performance of Jaden Akins yesterday?
Well, I think first off, if you want to talk about it, it's not what his overall numbers in the game were. It's when they happened. And, Jaden Akins had I think he was like 4 from 8 from 3 in the first half was significant because he only shot 12 3-pointers in the previous 4 games. So not only did he shoot the ball, but he shot the ball when Michigan State needed him to. Jace Richardson was on the bench with foul trouble. Michigan State was stagnant on offense. They weren't getting the ball inside like they wanted to. And it was really a perimeter game where you had to have guys hitting threes. So for Jaden Akins to do what he did in that first half and giving Michigan State what they needed to have to keep that game close was huge. And I think also, like if I was going to characterize it, and I did after the game in my story, I felt like that was the best overall performance by Jaden Akins, not just because of the scoring, but because of when he did the scoring when it mattered, and also the job he did on John Tonje, because that is one of the hardest covers in the Big Ten, one of the most exhausting covers in the Big Ten, to shoot the way he did, give Michigan State the boost they needed in the first half, and then also to just shut John Tonje down by chasing him around and making sure he didn't catch the ball and just, being tireless in that defensive chore. That was huge because Wisconsin does as good a job as anyone running their offense. I think they have as many pieces in the Big Ten. They're like Maryland, but disciplined, and they have more pieces coming off the bench that can do different things. So for Michigan State to get what they got from Jaden Akins, not only the big scoring stuff, but the way he defended John Tonje, a guy that's got him by 30 pounds, is very athletic, and nobody Jaden Akins' size has stopped John Tonje this year. So for him to do that and to provide the scoring and to provide leadership and also having 6 rebounds, that was huge for Michigan State. And he had kind of his senior moment, in my opinion, because Michigan State needed that game. They've done a great job in the past 4 games leading up to that with 4 straight quad 1 wins. This was the 5th, but Wisconsin's a team that has had success against Michigan State in the Breslin Center, winners of their last 3 games against Michigan State at Michigan State. And this is as good and balanced the Wisconsin offense as I've seen in a while. And they also still play good Wisconsin defense and don't make a lot of mistakes that some of the other teams in the Big Ten make. So this is by far, in my opinion, Michigan State's best win of the season. I know that, Klesmit didn't play for Wisconsin, but I think Kamari McGee in the starting lineup creates some other problems that Klesmit doesn't for Wisconsin. And Wisconsin's a team that had more than enough depth to overcome the lack of a starter. They've had experience playing without Klesmit before, and this is a huge win for Michigan State.
And Michigan State continues to get comfortable with their rotation and their roles. Akins, what you were describing a moment ago, the defense he played on Tonje. The defense, going back to their comeback against Oregon, against Shielstad, was that his name? The guard for Oregon that had a real good first half. Akins guarded him in the second half, closed him out. Akins, 4 out of 9 from three-point range, had not been shooting great throughout the course of the season, but he's capable of doing this. What I'm describing is what people these days call a 3-and-D in the NBA. A guy that can play defense, hit some three-pointers. Akins has not shot real well consistently all year, but his career, he's an excellent three-point shooter, 35% plus, 40% as a sophomore. Coming into the year, everyone was expecting Jaden Akins to be the go-to player, including Jaden Akins. Did he put some pressure on himself? Is he capable of being that guy for a top 10 team? Maybe not. Jace Richardson comes along, establishing himself as what some people believe is going to be a mid-first round draft choice this spring. So Richardson, like it or not, to become Batman. He's the guy with the ball in his hands late in the game. We'll talk about that more in a moment. Akins was trying to be that guy all season. The last time we saw the ball in Akins' hands late in a game was at USC. Didn't go real well. And Michigan State tried it. Sometimes when you're trying to get to the moon, you blow up some rockets on the way. Michigan State blew up a couple rockets there. Haven't lost many games, but came out of that with a different approach to late game situations. We've seen it more. Richardson in this game, late in the game, ball in his hands. So now Akins doesn't have that pressure to create and think about all these things, spot up more. Now, there's times when he gets it and finishes in transition. Maybe sees an opening in the half-court offense, takes it. But if his role is morphing into being, a little bit more of a Charlie Bell type of guy. Defense, he adds some rebounding, like you said in this game, hitting some open three-pointers, more of a catch-and-shoot go-to guy, maybe as a shooter than Bell. Not exactly the same type of player. But his role, I think there's less pressure on him for this team to deliver. He's still putting pressure on himself for his long-term future, but they want to get a handle on that and process that properly. But I think that's one thing about this team that maybe some people are overlooking is the way that it's morphed and the metamorphosis that's taken place during the season with some of these puzzle pieces. And Izzo, an underrated psychologist, getting these players to fit in, move into the starting lineup, out of the starting lineup, not the quarterback at the end of the game. Then you are, Hollum is the late game point guard now instead of Fears. Fears is okay with that. Richardson has got the ball in his hands, though, in a lot of situations because he's got the passing ability to make that happen. A lot of metamorphosis taking shape, including that of Jaden Akins, and that's one reason Izzo last week said, hey, I think we're going to shoot it well at some point. We saw it in this game. Akins, when he's doing this, how good is this team, Paul, and can it continue?
Well, it can continue, obviously, I think. But the thing that was impressive about Jaden Akins is he wasn't Robin in the first half. He was Batman because Jace Richardson was not in the game.
Great point.
Jace Richardson was with two fouls. So Jaden Akins had to do this. And on offense, it was stagnant, and there was no other scoring options because Michigan State was not getting the ball inside like they wanted to. So Jaden Akins did this when he had to, when no other option. Trey Hallman wasn't hitting. They didn't have they didn't have a 4-man hitting. Booker hit 1-3, but he was terrible everywhere else. Jackson Kohler missed a couple. So Akins had to be the guy. He was Batman in the first half. Now, is he a Robin on this team? Yeah, I think he is. But I think it's also important to look at, overall, like he's him in Big Ten play. Jaden Akins hasn't shot as well as he's wanted to, but he still is, amongst Michigan State starters, he and Jace Richardson are both shooting 33% from three. Akins has 11 more threes in Big Ten games than Jace Richardson does. Jace Richardson is on a heater. He was great. He did a great job creating yesterday. He had a really good game, but Jaden Akins showed that he has it in him to deliver when he needs it. And it was similar, in my opinion, to what we saw from, Matt McQuaid, his senior year, when kind of Cassius Winston was kind of fading because there was so much on Cassius Winston's plate. He was a guy that for a long time was leading the Big Ten, Cassius Winston, in three-point shooting percentage, but he played so many minutes and he was having this residual wear down. And Matt McQuaid, late in that season, really stepped up and carried that team when he needed to scoring-wise. I'm not saying Jaden Akins could be that guy, but against Wisconsin, he was. And in the second half, he didn't need to be because Michigan State got balanced scoring. They got out and ran in transition. They ended up getting half of their field goals from bigs, with some great side ball screen action and freeing those guys up inside. And Michigan State shot 50% essentially in the second half against Wisconsin. Jace Richardson made some great plays as a facilitator. He made a couple big shots. But when that operation wasn't going, it was Jaden Akins being the guy carrying it. He got him to halftime, only down 2, and then Michigan State was able to play a great team half of basketball in the second half. And I think that so Akins did what seniors are supposed to do. They came up when their team needed it, and this was a huge game for him, a huge game for Michigan State, who has a chance to get his share of the Big Ten title on the road at Iowa this week.
What did you think of the post-game comments from Greg Gard, Wisconsin's coach, Tom Izzo? Your thoughts about that? Anything stick out in terms of the post-game comments? Greg Gard, very complimentary of Michigan State. Michigan State getting some big offensive rebounds late. He said they've been doing that to a lot of teams all year. And Izzo with some interesting points about what they wanted to do against Wisconsin, the way Wisconsin operates differently with Wisconsin's a pretty good rebounding team with a couple 7-footers out there. A lot of times they tip rebounds to their teammates. He said Michigan State's players actually worked on scout team tipping rebounds around. He says when you play Wisconsin, you got to do some things differently because they do things differently. Michigan State was on it, did a good job with that. Before I let you answer on that, I'll say that remember when Michigan State lost to Indiana, Tom Izzo said, hey, we didn't practice enough for zone defense. Indiana hadn't played it a lot. They did play it the game before against Michigan. He said it won't happen again. Last Friday, I was at basketball practice. Michigan State, you can't say it when you're there, but after the fact, you can reveal these things, whatever. Michigan State was working against a 1-3-1 zone defense. I hadn't studied Wisconsin enough to know that they played any zone, much less a 1-3-1. Then they played it in that game, and we hear that they don't do it very often. But the point is they sprang it on Michigan State because that's what some teams are doing. And although they have not played much zone this year, Izzo, true to his word, as he said, as he pledged after the Indiana game, that would not happen again. They worked on some zone prior to the Wisconsin game. Part of the reason for that is they had more days to prepare. And when Wisconsin went zone, Michigan State operated pretty well against it, including one time when they penetrated from one angle and threw alley-oop pass behind that 1-3-1 defense. Sometimes those diagonal alley-oop passes are open against 1-3-1. Michigan State was ready for it, like Izzo said they would be. Wisconsin's an interesting prep. But your thoughts about what Izzo said, what Gard said, or anything else in the locker room?
Well, I think for Gard, it was like, Gard's a great dude. He's honest and he's a great. I mean, he's great for basketball. He's done an amazing job at Wisconsin. He's changed kind of who he is instead of kind of run a shot clock guy. He's kind of changed, and they've gone away from some of that swing stuff. They've done a great job of adapting with the time, and they've really done a great job of player development. I don't think anybody, and skill development. I think few teams in the country do as good a job as Wisconsin with skill development and player development, and they've had a great season this year. But from Wisconsin's standpoint, the thing that I think frustrated Gard is the level of defense that Michigan State played in this game. Wisconsin missed some shots that they have made in other games, and I think some of that is, and we've seen that with other teams. Maryland in the second half missed some shots that maybe they normally make, but I think Michigan State, with their depth, their strength in numbers, they make teams work as hard as they've had to work all season. And Michigan State's done a better job of taking away certain aspects of bread and butter plays that have worked for teams, and few people are able to stop. I think. The job that Michigan State did on John Tonje, as I mentioned, was really good. But in addition to that, they also really did a nice job of closing out on Wisconsin's 2 7-footers that can both hit threes and have done so at a high level this year, that are shooting close to 40%. So for Michigan State to be able to play as good as they did defensively with their guards, and also have the bigs be involved in that process, but take away that 3-point shot. I think Gard was really impressed with what Michigan State did on defensively. He was also disappointed that his team wasn't able to make some of the open shots that they did. But I think Gard was really impressed with Michigan State's guard defense, and he was really impressed, I think, with Michigan State's bigs. I thought one of the most interesting aspects in this game was kind of the way Michigan State changed, and they kind of pulled to Wisconsin. Wisconsin's done a really nice job of after hitting some threes in the first half, of going in the second half to some side ball screen stuff. Right, guys, Michigan State did that to Wisconsin. I just feel like for Gard, he felt like this was a game that they had to win, obviously, with where they were in the Big Ten standings. And I feel like his attitude was, we did everything we could, but Michigan State was a better team. And I think, Gard's good for college basketball, but this Michigan State team, we see more and more of these coaches talking about how connected they are, how deep they are, how hard they play for each other. And I think Gard's upset because it's different from being where he is, because he's a team that he has a team that he felt like is a contender, is good enough to win the Big Ten. So it's harder for him to be complimentary of a Michigan State, which is kind of, the only team in the country right now that has won 5 straight quad one games this season. And to see, that his team struggled with the same exact stuff that those other 4 teams that played Michigan State previously struggled with, I think it was kind of we're doing the best we can, but I don't know how to get over on these guys. And that's not what we really expect from Gard. Usually it's like, our team messed up in this area. I don't think they messed up, except they gave Michigan State too much transition, in his opinion, but that stuff came off great defense. Mm-hmm. And I think, it was one of those things where you don't want to admit that you got beat by a better team, but on Sunday, Michigan State was the better team, and Wisconsin threw a lot of different stuff at them. I think in a lot of ways, Wisconsin was fortunate to continue to be in that game, and I think officiating kind of helped them out in that aspect. But I think there's a lot of respect, and I think, these two guys, there's a lot of mutual respect between Tom Izzo and Greg Gard. But Greg Gard knew he was playing the best team in the Big Ten, and Michigan State proved that on Sunday. That's kind of my takeaway from his press conference.
In Big Ten games, Michigan State is holding teams to 26% from three-point range, first in the Big Ten by a wide margin. Wisconsin came into this game having made more three-pointers than any team in the Big Ten, and maybe even attempted more. They've been living by it. Sometimes 50% of their shots are from three. But they come out in this game, Michigan State holds them to 16%. Izzo, interestingly, said, like you said, they wanted to prevent Wisconsin's bigs from getting going from 3-point range. Their bigs did go 3 out of 10 from 3-point range. All 3 of those 3-pointers that their bigs made were situations where Michigan State's center was more, the elbow nail, weak side, sag help, looking at some action that was going off to the center's left, to the right wing with some actions there. Taking away the middle, as guard said. Drive, kick to the center, get out on him, maybe a tad late, and they made three 3-pointers that way. I think 2 over Cooper, 1 over Kohler. It's just an area of emphasis that you choose to do if you're Michigan State. If that's Danny Wolf, Danny Wolf, you're out there earlier. So that didn't really jibe with what Izzo said. He said they wanted to take away 3-pointers from the bigs, but those 3 that they made were both situations where they were clogging the middle, as guard said. So they didn't get burned by it, but they did give up 3 that way. But overall, Wisconsin, 16%. They lead the Big Ten in 3-pointers made. Michigan State holds them to 16%. They did have some open ones. Greg Gard lamented that they had some open threes that he thought were good shots that they didn't make. But game after game, we're seeing Michigan State holding teams below their 3-point averages, well below their 3-point averages. Michigan State has good athletic guards, and they go to the bench, and it's game after game after game. They're having an impact on preventing teams from hitting their marks from 3. There were some open ones, but if this happens, and it continues to happen, when you're playing 3-point defense like that, man, that's a great thing to have if you can consistently harness that like Michigan State has. Your thoughts?
Yeah, first off, I don't know how, if you play a team like Wisconsin that has the ability to shoot threes from every position and has 2 7-footers that can hit those threes, and has a guy that can break you down like John Tonje. Not only that, Tonje is an elite scorer, but John Blackwell is strong, and he's one of the best penetrating guards in the Big Ten. And then that Kamari McGee, who was coming off the bench but started, he's another guy that's very good at driving off the baseline. He's fast, and he was shooting 54% from 3. So you've got all these different options for Wisconsin, and they have the ability to collapse defenses, with their penetration ability. I think that's the thing that, we think of Wisconsin as being a 3-point shooting team, and they're shooting more threes than we've ever seen them shoot before, but they're also able to score off the bounce, and they're able to also, every guy can penetrate. There's a really high skill level. They have, I think they have 5 or 6 guys on their roster that have 50 or more assists this year. So you really don't always know where that pass is coming from. And then, like Michigan State, you talked about those open threes from the bigs. And I felt like you're exactly right with what you're saying. The bigs had a responsibility to help out in other areas, but those windows that those guys shot from, those, I didn't think those closeouts were late, especially the ones over, maybe the one over Winter. But Crowell really shocked me, and I've always thought he was a good 3-point shooter. The thing that's different that he is this year as opposed to last year, what surprised me is on one of those 3-point shots that he had Carson Cooper closing out on him. He adjusted the arc of his shot like instinctively, more so than I can remember, a big doing. It's like he was going to shoot it flat, and then all of a sudden he put more arc on it. And I did not know that he could do that with his shot. That was really impressive to me. And, I asked Carson Cooper about, afterwards about the defensive game plan. And he was saying, yeah, it was really, really tough for us. We wanted to keep those guys in check and keep their 7-footers from making threes, because they make a lot of them, and they do usually inside out. But he said, the challenge for the bigs, and for him in particular, was that, you've got to help out in that elbow area, and then you've got to recover. And then that's not easy. And very few defenders can do it. And one of the things that Tom Izzo said in his post-game press conference, and I think this is often goes underappreciated with Carson Cooper, Tom Izzo described him as an elite defender. Yeah. And I think you can't ask a lot of guys that aren't high-level defenders to do what Michigan State's bigs were asked to do. And to their credit, they executed. And I was kind of surprised by a few things in that game, and I thought Michigan State went under more ball screens than they were going to against Wisconsin.
Against guards, yeah.
And that really surprised me.
And that's to Greg Gard's point, going under the ball screens to try to take away the middle, take away that drive. And the flip side of that coin is if you're going under ball screens, you're giving them an opening for one dribble and let it fly, which they didn't do a whole lot of. Late in the game, Blackwell had a drive against Fears because he rejected the ball screen and went the other way against it, and Michigan State didn't quite get that closed off, went all the way in for a layup. I think that was like 7 minutes to go or something like that. Blackwell had a pretty good game. But you're right, Michigan State is a great observation. Michigan State did go under those ball screens made that choice against a team that can shoot three-pointers at all 5 positions, which is problematic. Made it work by holding Wisconsin to 34% overall from the field as Michigan State continues to play excellent defense. You made the point about Izzo describing Cooper as an elite defender. It's a new word Izzo's using for Cooper. Last year, there were a lot of Michigan State fans out in the Twitterverse and elsewhere saying, why are we playing Cooper this many minutes? They just look that he's limited on offense and think that he's not worthwhile in other areas. His defense was good that year. As a freshman, his defense was pretty good, better than Kohler. That's why he was in the playing group, sometimes closing out games as a freshman because of his defense. Now his defense is even better. He's even bigger and stronger and getting into his man years and more athletic. The offense is coming around, and he's continuously a plus player, continuously real strong with his defense and his rebounding. And this game has a big impact, finishing 2 alley-oops, I think it was. Maybe 2 alley-oops and then a side ball bounce pass dunk from Jace Richardson. Having that kind of impact, playing defense, and 22 minutes in the game. Every game, Cooper's around 22 minutes. That's part of the reason he's got so much horsepower right now. It's a big reason why I think a lot of these Michigan State players have a lot of horsepower. You can visibly see that Michigan State is more fresh than these opponents late in the game, getting loose balls, getting rebounds. Remember those offensive rebounds they had late in the game against Michigan? Loose balls in this situation, able to finish. That strength in numbers thing and all these fresh legs, it's really having an impact here as they look to close out the Big Ten championship. Meanwhile, I'm seeing more Big Ten teams that look fatigued. Wisconsin looked a little fatigued. Michigan looks fatigued. Braden Smith, point guard for Purdue, has played too many minutes this year. He's not the same guy. Seeing that all over the Big Ten. I don't think it's a coincidence that this is the first year that the Big Ten has had the 20-game schedule with the West Coast trips, and it's having an impact. Michigan State's good on sprints. They're good in a marathon. They're ready to close this thing out. Fresh legs. Is that the way you saw it also late in this game again?
Yeah, I mean it's a big part. Having Cooper on the floor in late games, I haven't gone back and looked at like the number of pick and roll dunks he has had. Mm-hmm. But we're talking about late in the game when teams are trying to come back. He's an elite defender, but he's also one of the 2 areas where he's really improved from last year to this is he's got much better hands. So, he's able to catch that ball with confidence and then finish, because there's lots of times where he would have been open for those screen and roll dunks last year. But he couldn't catch and he didn't finish. So he's doing that. But the number of pick and roll dunks that he's had in these last 5 quad 1 wins, it feels like there's at least 1 or 2 every single game. And those are pretty much, they're very hard to defend when teams are worn down. Wisconsin is a good physical team. They do a better job of fouling with their lower body and getting away with it than any team in the country. It's been that way since Bo Ryan. It's still that way. But late in this game, we're, I think, worn down. And part of that is you've got to work so hard for everything you get against Michigan State. John Tonje being like one of those guys, he was worn out. And I haven't seen him that tired since maybe, the Oregon game when TJ Bamba, who's also a 6'5", 225 athlete type, leaned on him for a half and made it really difficult for him. Tonje was worn down. He was hands on his hips every time. There's a chance to have a breather. Aikens made him work minutes. Even for the catch.
36 minutes.
And Blackwell, Blackwell is a really interesting player because he beat Michigan State off the dribble a couple times in that first half as well. He's strong for being a guard. He's got an explosive first step, and if you're kind of looking in the wrong direction, he's going to put his hip on you and drive past you. He did that. He's done it all season long. He's one of the best penetrating guards. But those guys were all gassed by the end of the game, and Michigan State was getting good, easy scoring chances. But a couple different things that. The fact that they're not committing turnovers, that was another underappreciated aspect of this game. Only 7 turnovers for Michigan State. And if they're rebounding at a high level, had another double-digit advantage in rebounding. Jackson Kohler had as good a rebounding performance as I can remember in a lot of years. It was like one of those Kenny Goins type, almost 20 type rebounding performances, simply because so many of the rebounds that Jackson Kohler had were in traffic, where there were 3 guys around him or 2 guys around him, and he somehow found a way to will himself to get that rebound. Michigan State is an exhausting team to play, and I think It's really impressive. And you look at, we talked about their 3-point shooting defense a minute ago, but it's crazy to me in my mind to think that they, in the last 3 games, they've held teams to 19.2% from shooting the three. And the 3 teams that they played were Michigan, Maryland, and Wisconsin. Maryland and Wisconsin are among the best 3-point shooting teams in the country. Mm-hmm. And for them to do that, and to have a big rebounding advantage and to be getting inside-outside production, Michigan State's a handful for any team that they're going to play.
Right. And getting back to the fatigue thing, Tanjay, 36 minutes, Blackwell, 37 minutes, combined 2 out of 15 from three-point range. And those are 36 minutes and 37 minutes against fresh Michigan State guards that are changing like hockey lines every 2 minutes. You know, when I was watching the post-game press conference against Michigan last week when Michigan State played Michigan, Danny Wolf, I wasn't there, but I looked at the video of it. I mean, I was in Chrysler, but I wasn't there for his interview. And I don't know Danny Wolf really well, but it looked to me like that loss really bothered him in terms of shaking his confidence in the team. Maybe, you know, I don't know him well enough. Maybe I'm looking into that too much. But he was impressed that Michigan State stayed connected, and he said Michigan did not stay connected. But when a team just has so much more juice than you do because of their depth, I wonder what that does to some of these guys mentally. Now, Wisconsin was without Klesmet, but in this game, Wisconsin only went 7 deep. They had their 5 starters. Gilmore played 16 minutes. And Janicki played 13 minutes. That's it. 7 deep on the road against this hockey line changes of racehorses coming at him from Michigan State. Cooper, 22 minutes, and it's a hard 20 minutes. Kohler, 30 minutes, some of his best basketball of his career. Zapawa goes in there for 17 minutes. Holloman, 19 minutes. And Fiddler, 20 minutes. He's getting more playing time here and there, but it's hard to play Fiddler and Cohen-Carr a lot of minutes in a game. You kind of have to choose one or the other, which is difficult. You mentioned Kohler, 16 rebounds. There's that sequence in the first half when he got 2 offensive rebounds where he looked like Dennis Rodman. I know Izzo talked about in the post-game press conference. Got a big offensive rebound, kicked it back out, missed a 3-pointer. Got another offensive rebound, kicked it back out, and Akins hit one of his 3-pointers. I think it was Akins. During a key time when Michigan State was trying to wrestle control the game after Wisconsin's strong start. Those 2 offensive rebounds had a big impact on Michigan State regaining its footing and getting control of that game. 16 rebounds for Kohler, another double-double, 10 points, 16 rebounds. I think he's 4th or 5th in the Big Ten in rebounds. But rebounds per minute, I'll bet he might be the best in the Big Ten. Certainly when he went against Maryland and Michigan, who have 3 of the best rebounders statistically in the Big Ten, he did really well against those guys. And I thought Graham Couch had a great question in the post-game press conference, and I was wondering the same thing. And I was going to ask that this week, but Graham already did, about, Kohler coming into the year. We all knew that he had offensive ability. And I remember asking Izzo, what kind of rebounding team do you think this team will be this year? And you really didn't know. You had Zapawa coming in, you had Kohler coming in, you had Cooper, but you really didn't know. And that's always been a staple for Michigan State. I didn't necessarily think this would be one of those Michigan State teams that would have a rebounding margin as good as it is. I thought it might be like a +3, a +4, +5, like some teams he's had in recent years. But no, they've been a really strong rebounding team, and Kohler's a big reason for it. Izzo with some great insight about the energy that Kohler brings every single time. And let me tell you something about Kohler, Paul. He was not a starter at the beginning of the year. People may forget that. He was coming off the bench. Xavier Booker was starting, and Booker got his chance. And I'm not sure if the coaches really thought that Booker was good enough to start, but they gave him a shot, gave him a chance at it. And like Izzo says, the players determine their own playing time. So rather than beginning the season with Booker on the bench and leaving him there all year, he began on the bench, and as we saw, he played his way out. And when Kohler, as a junior, finally got a chance to start. I mean, the first time he ever started, there was an energy level about him that once he finally was in the starting lineup, he respected it, he valued it, and I don't want to put words in his mouth, but he was not going to relinquish it. There was an energy about it. And I'm here to tell you that if he had been starting from the beginning as a freshman, he wouldn't have had that energy. That energy was programmed into him as a junior because he had to wait his turn, and this program doesn't let you start and get minutes unless you're accountable in all areas. And if you get in there and you mess up, you're coming back out, and that's just the way it is. Now, he was injured most of last year, and that certainly curtailed his development. He had to wait till his junior year, but when he got in there, not just scoring, but defense, he's not a great defender, but he's become functional. And he's had to work at it and change his body. All those things that he wasn't great at, those details, were better Because in this program, you don't get to start just because of what your ranking is, just because of what people want you to do. Now, Booker had it at the beginning of the sophomore year, ended up losing it, played 5 minutes in this game. But I think part of the reason Kohler is such a killer, Paul Konyndyk, is because he had to earn every step of the way. And when he got there, he was programmed to do it. Am I wrong about that?
No, and when I think back to his true freshman year, when he start at the start of the season, he was playing more minutes than Carson Cooper. Carson Cooper was the guy that when he came in was going to redshirt.
Yeah,
that's what the talk was. And then Michigan State saw how his lateral movement and how he could be a good ball screen defender. And his role at this time of year was kind of he was starting to become a 10-minute player. And as his role increased his true freshman year, and they made it run to the Sweet 16 there. Beat a very good Marquette team, a good USC team before that. But Carson Cooper was the guy as a true freshman that kind of saw his role more. In Jackson Kohler, frankly, I remember covering the Big Ten tournament that year and in the NCAA tournament when I was in the locker room, because you have to, you have limited time in the locker room and in the press conference. In the NCAA tournament, you were covering the press conferences I was doing in the locker room, and I could see that Jackson Kohler his head was hung. He was disappointed with his role, upset that he wasn't playing a bigger role. And to think that he stuck through the ups and downs. And I know he was injured, as a sophomore, but if you look at half the guys in the Big Ten that went to the transfer portal, a lot of those guys sat out because of injury the year before. And, to think that he stuck with this, kept on working on his game, got incrementally better, and had the willpower to say, hey, I'm not good at this. The coaches don't think I'm good at this. I'm going to prove them wrong. Mm-hmm. And rebounding and ball screen defense are two of those things. And, I would say better than functional because, I don't know, probably like functional is a good way to describe it, but the fact that he's taken on as many difficult defensive matchups and stood toe to toe with a guy like Dawson Garcia, some of the guys from North Carolina that can kill you off the bounce, some of the other guys, in the Big Ten,
the Michigan guys,
and it's just really, really impressive. And to me, it's it's kind of, I think inspiring is too big a word, but as someone who has teenage kids, and wants those kids to learn how to deal with adversity and come out for it stronger. I think Jackson Kohler is, to me, a role model for student athletes because, he bet on himself by sticking with it, but he also took to heart the criticisms and kept on working at it, but didn't do it in a self-destructive way. Because sometimes when you have a chip on your shoulder, and you're out to prove the world wrong, sometimes you can kind of be self-destructive in the process. I think the way he's gone about it, maintain that edge, the chip on his shoulder, has done a nice job. But he's also kind of, done it within a team construct. And I'm really impressed with him. Mm-hmm. I'm really impressed by the way he rebounded in the game. And to think, like what Michigan State's done rebounding-wise, we didn't know if this was going to be a great rebounding team. But to see them out-rebound a team like Illinois, who when they played Illinois 5 games ago, was the best rebounding team in the world because of, they had, Morez Johnson was not hurt at that time.
Right.
And, Michigan State's continuously out-rebounded teams through the stretch of quad one wins. And they've done it with teams knowing that Michigan State's really good at rebounding. Jackson Kohler's been such a huge part of that. And, I hope for a guy like Xavier Booker that he can become the kind of player that Jackson Kohler was. But I will say this about Jackson Kohler. He has always been driven and he's always been motivated. I remember interviewing him at a time where he was committed to Michigan State. And I remember interviewing his high school coaches, and they were talking about how that he needed to be a better ball screen defender because Michigan State said he couldn't defend ball screens. And that was his weakness. He was determined at that time as a high school senior to be better at what people said he couldn't be. And, so I think the drive has always been there, but I think he's grown up a ton, and he's been a huge part of Michigan State's success this season. Not only with what he's provided rebounding, he's given them some good points. And the thing about yesterday that I really valued from Jackson Kohler is he went 1 for 6 in that first half. A lot of guys that would go for 1 for 6, they wouldn't be as aggressive as he was on the offensive glass, on the defensive glass. And I think to a man on this Michigan State team, maybe with 1 or 2 notable exceptions, these guys are all bought in to the extent that if their shot's not falling, if things aren't going for them, they're going to find a way to bring value in other areas. And we've seen it from guys across this roster. And I think that's one of the things that makes a team connected, the fact that everyone cares enough where if maybe something doesn't go their way, they're still going to find a way to contribute. And Jackson Kohler is the poster boy, in my opinion, for that.
It's been fun to watch. And you think about some of these Michigan State players that have had a little bit of a journey to get here. I mean, Kohler's a junior. Jaden Akins is a senior. Trey Holloman is a junior. Xavier Booker last year had had a difficult freshman year. Carson Cooper is a junior, had a lot of things. Even Cohen Carr is a sophomore, has had to take a role here and there. We're talking about college basketball across the country where it is fashionable to change teams like you change underwear. Just leave. Wisconsin's had a couple of guys leave. Everybody, Illinois has had people come and go. Michigan had a coaching change. Michigan State, A.J. Hoggard moved on. Other than that, each one of those guys would be a candidate for poaching from other programs, big time. And Izzo's talked about the strength in numbers, be different, the camaraderie that he has tried to cultivate since going back to the summer and even before that. Izzo does a lot of psychological work, a lot of nurturing work behind the scenes that people don't understand that is important if you want to set the all-time record for 28 straight trips to the NCAA tournament. No one's ever done 28 straight if you count the COVID year like Izzo's going to do this year. Nobody in the history of the damn game. And, setting a record for most wins in Big Ten history. He's going to tie Bob Knight and Piggy Lambert for most Big Ten championships this week if they get one more win. In order to do those things year after year after year after year as one of the greatest coaches in the history of the sport, like Mike Krzyzewski described him last week, it's not just what you do on game day. It's what you do before the game. It's film work, but a lot of it is psychological nurturing of relationships with these players all year, 365 days a year. Backing off when you're supposed to, coming in when you're supposed to, meetings here and there. That's why you still have Kohler, you still have Akins, you still have Holloman, you still have Cooper, you still have Carr and Booker. These guys want to be a part of it at a time when people are just leaving programs left and right. Izzo's kept these guys, and then you get Jace Richardson coming in with a little shot of NBA talent on this team, and it's a team that is 24-5. Izzo bringing these personalities together. First of all, recruiting them as OKGs, our kind of guys. And the leadership was not good the last 2 years. It was not good. And sometimes Izzo would mention it at press conferences. He'd come to a press conference and say, our leadership right now is crap, And there were times when they thought leadership was getting better, and then we'd go back off the rails. And it went that way for like 2.5 years. You think you're getting leadership at the point guard level, and then it would drop off. And finally, it's been addition by subtraction. They moved on. And the player that moved on is a talented guy, but it wasn't quite. You couldn't be different like Izzo wants to be this year unless you've got these type of personalities. And you told me something about what Carson Cooper said after one of these games, might have been the victory over Purdue, that one of the reasons Michigan State's been good this year. What did he tell you? The level of the personalities? What exactly did Carson Cooper tell you about that?
Well, he told me it was after the Michigan game in the locker room, and I wrote a story about this. But he said, he said one of the reasons why he feels like Michigan State is so connected, why they're able to win these close games, is that these guys are all good character people that care about each other, and they have team goals, and they're winners, and they want to win. And he felt like the guys that Michigan State brought in the transfer portal fit the Michigan State system, and they're the same kind of good human beings that have made Michigan State work this year. And I think of guys like Trey Holloman, who selflessly, went to the bench without putting up a huge fight, because there's other guys on this team maybe that could have gone to the bench, but Trey Holloman's the guy that was willing to make that sacrifice. So there didn't have to be like a huge dust up, but these guys' willingness to play their roles, and Frankie Fiddler and Shimon Zapala buying in, and also having a chance for success. There's a picture that I just posted on the last story I wrote tonight about, it's a picture of, Simone Zapala and Jackson Kohler hugging each other on the bench and having a good time. That would apply to so many different guys on this team. Frankie Fiddler's the guy that came in and he was playing like 38 minutes a game, was a player of the year candidate in his conference and doing really, good things at Omaha. But the fact that he's been willing to kind of come off the bench, and it hasn't been easy for him. He's told me as much, that it's tough to kind of swallow your pride and become a different type of player and a different type of contributor. But they're excited to be part of this team because they feel like they're playing for something that's bigger than themselves. And I think these guys are having fun. The one thing I've heard from Jaden Akins this year for the first time in his career, it's easy in so many of these different games, even games where he hasn't shot well. He's talked about how much fun it was to win this game, or how much fun it is to be around these players. And it's something that's different. This is a team that's chemistry wise is is an exception to the rule in college basketball. I think Michigan State and Purdue have done a better job than any other teams in the conference at kind of building and developing players. And I think Wisconsin should probably be in that group as well. Those three teams have done as good a job culture-wise of developing their rosters and putting like teams with limited transfer portal guys together. But Michigan State is having a good time, and there's enough veteran players that have been through the downtimes. And downtimes at Michigan State, I will say, I'm not going to say they're downtimes because other teams would raise a banner for a Sweet 16 appearance. But These guys are relishing their opportunities, and because they've been through some tough times, they're not taking this stuff for granted. So, guys like Carson Cooper and Trey Holloman and Jay Nakins, they're going into this Wisconsin game, they're talking about, hey, these guys have beat us on our home floor 3 straight times. We're not going to let that happen again. This is important to us. Going to Iowa City this week. Some people are going to write about it. This is a trap game, and I think that's the furthest thing from the case for Michigan State because like the guys in the locker room afterwards, they weren't talking completely about the Wisconsin game. They're talking about, hey, we got to get better this week because we're not where we want to be as a team, and we're not going to let happen to us what happened a couple years ago in Iowa City. These guys want, and they see this game as a revenge game for them. And, it's a different kind of group of guys. And, I've covered this team for 20 years, and I can't remember everybody being this close and on the same page and being as single-mindedness as this team. So you talk about Tom Izzo doing a great job with communicating with the players. And I think he's done a fabulous job of over-communicating. You have to, given the environment that we cover college sports in.
And one of the guys, go ahead.
To the credit of the players, these players have done a better job of buying in. When you have family members, when you have agents telling you that you need to be doing this to increase your stock, you need to have, you need to be shooting this many shots. The fact that those players have bought in to the extent that they have and care about each other as much as they do is as impressive a job as anything Tom Izzo and his staff have done coaching, and they've done a great job coaching this year.
Yeah, they have. And Izzo always has little individual projects, psychological guys, bringing guys around. He's been bringing Akins around, working on things. By the way, I mentioned this on the Underground Bunker, or this Final Forum. Probably no coincidence, but Izzo's trying to be bringing Akins around, make him feel good about himself. You can do it. I believe in you. We're going to be a better shooting team. Probably no coincidence. Jay Nakins' father was at practice on Friday, and Izzo doesn't have a lot of parents around. It's kind of rare. Akins is a senior, and an invitation must have gone out. These are the type of things that Izzo does, pushing the buttons when he gets towards March. This is why he's one of the greatest to ever do it. Knowing what to do for certain players at certain times. Akins goes out 4 3-pointers in the first half. That's not why, but Izzo will change. He'll change the mode of operation on a player just for the sake of change, trying to get something to work for him if he knows he has the ability. And if they get that out of Akins, it becomes a really good team. Let me say this, Paul. Last 5 games, Michigan State, who at one point was the worst 3-point shooting team in the country out of 360 teams or whatever it was, they've been last in the Big Ten all year. The last 5 games, 41%, 30%, 40%, 26%, 33%. 3 of the last 5 games, they've been above 33%. They get that with this defense and this rebound and this depth in the transition game. It's going to be hard to beat them. It's going to be really hard to beat them. Someone's going to have to be really efficient and really hot. And it's hard to be hot against Michigan State. In terms of individual projects that Izzo's been bringing along, one of the guys he's been bringing along is Frankie Fiddler. Fiddler's had a disappointing season. He's supposed to be a scorer, shooter. He's had to change his game, a little bit more shot, fake, drive, get to the free throw line, play some defense, which wasn't necessarily a strong suit of his, but to get on the court and stay on the court, you have to be functional, at least at Michigan State. And he's really been trying to grind it out and become a pretty good defensive player. And he guarded Tanjay a little bit. His rebounding's gotten better. Fiddler plays 20 minutes in this game, hits a 3-pointer from the power forward position. Fiddler coming around doing some things, giving them 6 rebounds. Here's the situation, though. If he's playing, and Michigan State did go small for quite a while, it's kind of hard to find minutes for Cohen Carr. Cohen Carr had a huge, loud impact on this game with that steal, run the court, dunk. which when they were down, I think they were up 1 or 2, and that made it 4 with about 6 minutes to go, turning point of the game. Also had that alley-oop jam during Michigan State's comeback in the first half. Carr had a big impact on this game, but he only played 13 minutes. So if you're a coach and the coaching staff trying to get the rotation down and who's going to play and so forth, that's something that you look at. You're like, okay, how did the puzzle piece work for this game? It doesn't necessarily need to be like that every game. But if Fiddler's going to play 20, Carr plays 13, it's a difficult back and forth, but that's part of strength in numbers. That's part of be different. And Cohen Carr, to his credit, is another beautiful kid. But what do you think about Carr playing 13 minutes and having that kind of impact? Do you agree that that's, I don't want to say it's an issue, but that's a riddle for Michigan State to get these guys minutes? Cohen Carr 13 minutes in this game. They didn't do it wrong. They weren't wrong. Worked out great. But that's kind of strange and difficult, isn't it?
Yeah, but you think about it. What did Frankie Fiddler give him? I mean, he gave him 8 points in the second. I think he gave him 8 points in the second half. And the one thing that it depends on which defense you're playing. Wisconsin is really good in terms of position defense. And the thing that Frankie Fiddler can do, Cohen Carr is good. Cohen Carr has showed the ability to drive, use that power dribble, and get to the basket against teams that have breakdowns on defense. Wisconsin doesn't have breakdowns on defense. Frankie Fiddler's ability to put the ball on the floor, drive, absorb contact, and get to the free throw line is what you need against a team like Wisconsin. And to his credit, Frankie Fiddler played really good defense against Tanjay. I thought Cooper had a couple of good defensive sequences against Tanjay. Or I'm sorry, Cohen Carr had a couple of good defensive sequences against Tanjay, but he didn't play as good a defense as Fiddler did. And, minutes, there's going to be up and downs and reasons to complain about anything out there. But what worked? The whole point for Michigan State is to win. And Michigan State shot 50% against a good defense in the second half, and they won. And Frankie Fiddler was a big reason why. Cohen Carr, he had 2 monster dunks in that game, and I think that those dunks really, that first one that he had the reverse on the assist from Holloman, the long lob dunk, that was huge because it kind of gave Michigan State an emotional spark that they needed. But in the second half, Frankie Fiddler was the guy that they needed, Cohen Carr didn't play as many minutes, but Michigan State won, and that's all that matters right now. And I think that's something that Cohen Carr, with another off-season of development, I think he's going to be able to do a lot of the things because he has come a long way skill development-wise, and he's going to be even better defensively. And there's going to be games where you can't keep him off the floor because he's going to be much needed, even this year. There's going to be times where it's a better matchup for him to be on the floor than it is for Frankie Fiddler. But to Fiddler's credit, he's done a great job. And I'm not sure where some of those minutes are going to come from. But the bottom line for me is Michigan State beat the number 11 team in the country. By 9 points, and they held one of the best shooting teams in the country to, an abysmal 3-point shooting percentage, and they won it. And they're on their way to a Big Ten championship because of it. I'm not going to complain when everything's about buy-in, about how many minutes a guy is playing when Michigan State's in a position to win a championship. And
do you agree that can be difficult for coaches to say, man, we got to, Cohen played 13 minutes. Does it come up?
You can, but then you can also point to a time against Rutgers when he was on Ace Bailey and played a ton of minutes, or against Michigan where he did a really good job in the second half and played a lot of minutes. Basketball is a situational matchup type game. So yeah, obviously those conversations are going to be hard to have. They're hard to have, but at the same time, the fact that Michigan State is willing to have those conversations puts them in a different area than maybe some of these other programs that don't over communicate.
I agree. And Matt Painter was talking about what makes Michigan State great. He says the buy-in, because of the depth. To your point, if you're going to play that many players to keep everybody on the bus, really hard to do in this day and age. Michigan State's doing it because of these personalities, partly.
I mean, you see it in the NBA all the time, right? I mean, like I'm thinking of some of the good Golden State Warriors teams. There's times that certain guys couldn't play. There's times where a guy is going to play 5 minutes, and then the next time they come in, and because the matchup is better, they're going to play. In the next series, they come in and they're going to play 20 minutes, and that's Michigan State's kind of running like an NBA style thing right now, where they are getting strength in numbers, but they're also doing a good job of matchups, and I think that's what you have to do. And it's important. I think the toughest conversation that Michigan State's going to have as they move forward is if you want to talk about tough conversations, it's going to be, what do you do with Xavier Booker? Because he plays minutes in the first half, but this game was a perfect example. When he came on the floor, Michigan State had some momentum, and it got sucked away with some of his breakdowns and some of his inability to play defense.
He drove and had a ball stolen on a high dribble that one time, right?
Yeah, and it wasn't just that. He was lost on defense multiple times, and there's a 3-point play because of him. And Michigan State can't afford that. And when you get into playing championship basketball, so that's the toughest conversation. You talk about minutes on the roster. The toughest conversations are the ones that Izzo's going to be late. And I'm sure they've already talked about it, but at what point does this cost us a game? It hasn't in the last 5. He's played in every single one of the last 5 with them having quad 1 wins. But and there's going to be people out there that say, yeah, well, he hit a big 3 in this game. Yeah, I agree. That's great. He has to, because if you're giving up 12 points, you got to give something in return. And I'm not saying he gave up 12 points in everyone, but this whole strength of numbers thing, Michigan State's better defensively in the second half because he's not playing in the second half for the most part. Mm-hmm. And I mean, there's something to that. The reason why they're so good down the stretch is their best defensive players on the floor down the stretch. Mm-hmm. And, so I'm really hopeful. I think he's a great kid. I think he's come a long way, but I'm hopeful that he's able to take a page out of Jackson Kohler's playbook and learn how to harness the willpower inside himself and have that dog kind of mentality. And some guys aren't built like that. And I don't know if he ever will be. I think he's grown up a lot over the last 2 years.
He's way better than he used to be. Absolutely. He's way better than he used to be.
Yeah, and that's the toughest conversation, though, in terms of minutes on this roster.
Sure. All right, Paul, I'm going to let you go. I really appreciate your time here, Spartan, on the VCast, and we'll see you later this week. Michigan State's playing Iowa, then a home game senior day against Michigan. Should be a crazy celebration on Sunday at the Breslin Center. We can assume, possibly, Michigan State will be a Big Ten champion by that point, and maybe there'll be a banner going up that day. It's going to be could be an amazing day. 7 days after that, Selection Sunday. We'll see what Michigan State, with all this depth, maybe they can win a Big Ten tournament also. They'll be difficult to beat out there. Izzo tries to win those games. He doesn't what's the word? Doesn't emphasize it the way some coaches do in other conferences and so forth. But if he can win one, he'd like to have one of those also. But it's March, and Michigan State's good and surprisingly good. And Tom Izzo, perhaps the face of college basketball these days, has a pretty good operation going with a really good conglomeration of players, winning a lot of games for Michigan State once again, 24-5, looking like a number 2 seed at this point. Going to be dangerous in March. And Paul and I will be continuing to cover it over at SpartanMag.com. Make sure to give us a like here at this channel. Subscribe to this channel. Go to SpartanMag.com. Become a subscriber. Try SpartanMag.com. $1 for the first week. Check it out. We'd love to have you over there. Paul, thanks for your help. We'll be talking to you soon. Thanks a lot. Take care. Get some sleep. All right.
Yeah, the one thing I want to say before I go is I've covered this team for a lot of years. You've covered it longer than I have. I cannot ever remember a team having a 5-game stretch like this where they beat as many good teams as they have in a row. This is like really uncharted territory, and they've done it on the road and at home, and it really sets this team apart from a lot of great teams over the years because we talked about the backloaded schedule all season long, but these teams that they've beaten are good teams. Mm-hmm. I can't remember them having. I've seen them beat 2 top 5 teams in back-to-back games, but I've never seen a stretch like this from a team that maybe doesn't have as high a ceiling as some of the teams we've covered over the years. Mm-hmm. It's really impressive.
All right, so it was Wisconsin. The 5 games goes back, 7, 14, 15 days.
Illinois, since February 11. You're looking at
February 15th is when they won at Illinois. So you're talking
about February 11th. It was a low point of the season with that loss against Indiana, and then since then, you got a win at Illinois. Then you come home, you got Purdue, and then Michigan, and then at Maryland, which is a hugely difficult place to play, and then Wisconsin. It is really dang impressive.
5 wins in 15 days against good teams, like you said, Illinois, Maryland, Michigan, Wisconsin. Really good. Let me say that was 15 days. And on the Spartan Mag Live, we got some questions that we'll be having over there. And what we're going to do is we're going to let go of Paul here in a second, and we're going to start another broadcast. That'll be Spartan Mag Live, a different one for this week. And a question was asked about the gauntlet, and has Michigan State ever done it before? 5 wins. Let me tell you something. They have done it before. Now, they didn't go 5-0, but think about this and what was at stake. 2021, when Michigan State had that awful team that went 15-13. Tom Izzo, COVID, was out for 2 weeks. The team got COVID for 2 weeks. They were out. So 4 weeks, this team was without Tom Izzo that year. And when they came back, there was a one time when they hadn't practiced in 2 weeks. They had like 1 day prep, 2 day prep. They had to go play Rutgers, and the team hadn't been together for 14 days. And Rutgers beat them by 30. The Big Ten made them play all those games. And the Big Ten had that accordion effect on the schedule, making you play so many games. And Michigan State, in the last 16 days of that season, played 7 games. What you're just talking about, that gauntlet they just had, they won 5 games in 15 days. I'm talking 7 games in 16 days. They didn't win them all, but they went 5-2. And they beat number 3 Michigan, number 4 Ohio State, number 5 Illinois, and 2 wins against Indiana. They're 5-2 during a 7-game stretch in 16 days to get into the tournament and keep Izzo and Michigan State's streak alive. That was the most impressive thing I've ever seen from an Izzo team. Had to have those wins. Not a great team, but to get those wins against number 5 Illinois, number 4 Ohio State, number 3 Michigan was, to me, amazing. Maybe it's recency bias. And all that team did was get in the tournament, get in the first 4, played UCLA. They're up by 13. They lose. UCLA goes to the Final Four. But at the end of the year, Izzo had that team pretty good, beating those teams. Now, those teams might not have been as motivated as Michigan State was late in the year. But again, 7 games, 16 days with no choice but to win to get into the tournament. This gauntlet of these 5 wins, really good. That team that was merely 15-13 in some ways impressed me more. So that's just my opinion. But this gauntlet has been memorable and historic for a really good Tom Izzo coach team that could go do some great things here in the rest of the month. Any thoughts on that, Paul?
All right. Yeah, 2 things before I let you go is Michigan State is not overlooked this year, unlike that team. You know, those teams that they were playing could overlook Michigan State because of them not having a great record. They were down that year. The other thing is, wins at Illinois and at Maryland are with full houses. There is no crowds there. So I think that is maybe more what you're saying. You're talking about that stretch. That's the more unlikely scenario because you don't expect a team like Michigan State had then to have it is much success. But for Michigan State to do this the way they have, with as much riding on it, and and trying to get a championship, and other teams trying to knock them off because every team that they played have been like in the hunt or needed a win or circled it on the calendar, I think is pretty impressive. But we can agree to disagree on that. That was probably the best coaching job that I can remember covering Michigan State. But to me, this is one of the more impressive runs by a team, and it just feels like everyone's pulling their weight.
And Michigan State did not hold on to beat UCLA that day, but I wonder. As good as because Michigan State was playing good basketball at the end of the year when they beat Ohio State, Illinois, and Michigan, and they did sneak up on them a little bit and had to do it at home and all those things. And Izzo sometimes times things to really get the team peaked in March, and that team had their problems. They were 15-13. Like I said, they spent 4 weeks without the maestro. If they'd gotten by UCLA, could they have made the run UCLA did? Maybe not. But if they had. And coming down the stretch when you and I were covering it, I was like, don't close the door on that possibility. Even though that team was merely 15-12 going into the NCAA tournament, I'm like, don't close the door because this is Izzo, this is March, and they ended up losing that game to UCLA. But in their own way, in a limited way, with a team that's not as good as this team, they were still dangerous. And 15-13, and that was Izzo's worst season in the last 26 years.
I wonder looking back on that. Wonder looking back on the team. Aaron Henry was so huge. They rode him to so many big. He had so many major. Great games down that stretch. I think by the time he got to the NCAA tournament, he was worn down. And I think Michigan State might have been in a situation similar to what Michigan is right now. Because I think you talked about them. The house of cards that Michigan has. They got some great players, but Danny Wolf is not built to play as much on ball as he does, and to do that over the course of the season and ride them as much as he has to success. It's not easy for a guy to sustain that. I think Michigan State, Aaron Henry was mentally shot by the time they got to the NCAA tournament. And I've always felt really bad for him missing that cutout. against UCLA late, you know, because I felt like he gave so much to that team down the stretch. And then for a guy that spilled it like he did late in that senior year, just to get to the NCAA tournament, to see him go out like that was always one of those things where I just always felt bad for that dude as a result.
There was a box out that ended up, did it force overtime? Is that what it was? Yeah, they lost UCLA in overtime, and UCLA goes to the Final Four. To your point,
and it was the free throw shooter, right? So if you cut out that free throw shooter and get that rebound, that game is over and doesn't go to overtime.
They win. Yep, that's right. And to reiterate what Michigan State just did, 5 wins in 15 days, very busy. That was 7 games in 16 days. Not only were they big wins, but it was compressed and there was so much pressure, and they came through, and that was great. In 2021, his worst season in 26 years, quote unquote. All right, Paul, I appreciate it, man. I'll talk to you soon this week. All right, thanks for your good work.
All right, thank you very much. Good to see you.
All right, there goes Paul Konyndyk. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna shut this one off, and we're gonna start a SpartanMag Live. This is the VCast here at with Paul Konyndyk and myself from East Lansing. I'm in East Lansing. He's out in West Michigan. So we're going to go ahead and turn this off, but we have some questions from the mailbag. We'll be taking those questions here momentarily. So keep those browsers open. This will be popping back up in a matter of seconds. Thank you.